Need your daily fix on mixed martial arts?
We're going to kind of recap Bellator 155.
From UFC 198.
Who's who?
Kind of a controversial decision.
And who's not?
I couldn't figure out why, and then it hit me.
Well, don't you fret, because Golden State Media Concepts got you covered. Get your daily dose of MMA podcasts. Everything from the UFC, Bellator Fighting Championships, Extreme Cage Fighting, Invicta Fighting Championships, and so much more. Join us as we talk about some of the biggest names in mixed martial arts. We've got you covered here on Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast.
Thank you for tuning into the GSMC MMA Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Arnel De Leon, and hopefully you are doing fine for yourself, you are healthy, whether you're living in the States or internationally. I hope you're doing well as the COVID-19 issue is spreading and it's getting increasingly a lot more difficult, especially here in the States. The overall rates of which people are being infected is getting a lot worse. So hopefully everyone's doing fine, and within the span of the next 2 to 3 months, everything will be back to normal, and we get to watch our normal MMA shows without being interrupted by not speculating on whether or not the event will happen in the first place. So hopefully things will go well for mixed martial arts. Hopefully UFC events will go on normally as scheduled, and everything can be back to normal. So let's get to the news. UFC champion Jon Jones breaks silence after accepting plea to avoid jail time from DWI arrest. This is coming in from CBS Sports. UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones will not face jail time after entering a guilty plea to a charge of driving while intoxicated stemming from a March 26 incident in New Mexico. Jones agreed to a 1 year of supervised probation as part of the plea deal, provided he follows the terms of the agreement. Jon Jones must serve 96 consecutive hours in a community custody program similar to house arrest and complete 48 hours of community service. Other terms of the deal include Jones paying a $500 fine and taking part in a 90-day outpatient treatment program. The latter will be allowed to take place via video conferencing due to the coronavirus pandemic. His attorney and Mr. Jones have made aware that if he fails to do this, the state will seek to impose the balance of any jail time without regarding any exceptional circumstances. This coming from Bernalillo County District Attorney of Communications, Michael Patrick, said, Jones was arrested last Thursday in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where he lives and trains on charges of aggravated driving while intoxicated, negligent use of deadly weapon, no proof of insurance, and possession of an open container of alcohol. The latter 3 charges were dropped as part of a plea deal, which has not yet been approved by a judge. The 30-year-old Jon Jones broke his silence through a statement from his publicist. Neither UFC nor President Dana White has yet to publicly comment. Jones goes on to say, while we all work to understand and cope with stress and uncertainties surrounding the current state of our world, I want to express how truly disappointed I am that I have become the source of negative headline again, especially during these trying times, Jones said. I am disappointed for letting down the people I care about the most, my family, friends, and my fans. I accept full responsibility for my actions, and I know that I have some personal work to do, which involves the unhealthy relationship I have with alcohol. I have dedicated so much time and energy to improve my community, and I will not allow the personal setbacks to hinder my work. Within the community, when we need it most, I truly appreciate support I have received from the community of Albuquerque and all my fans around the world. I very much am looking forward to putting this behind me. Thank you for all the continued love and support, and please take care of yourselves. Police responded last week to reports of gunshots only to find Jones parked in his running vehicle with a half-empty bottle of Ricardo and a black handgun beneath his seat. Jones, who failed multiple sobriety tests, initially denied any knowledge of the gunshots before police found a spent bullet casing that was determined to come from his gun. Jones will wear an ankle bracelet and be on supervised probation for 1 year. There will also be an interlock ignition placed on any vehicle he operates, meaning he won't be able to start it without taking a breathalyzer test. He will still be able to use marijuana with a medical card. So Jon Jones is going through another huge issue again. It's honestly pretty sad, considering the fact that he is without a doubt one of the greatest fighters of all time. No doubt about that. I would say he is the greatest champion of all time if you were to talk about his sheer dominance. Other than Demetrius Johnson and Anderson Silva, you can make the claim that, well, John Jones is up there with them, if not arguably better, if you look at how he performs in all his fights. So I say, like, top 3, like, most dominant champions ever. You can say Anderson Silva, Demetrius Johnson, and John Jones, but there's a huge asterisk to John Jones, which makes his appeal a lot more difficult to get into. So after his arrest, a specific fighter that was very supportive of him was Daniel Cormier, which is very surprising considering the fact that Daniel Cormier, in multiple occasions throughout the years in his feud with John Jones, has referenced and or has mentioned or stated all of John Jones' past issues, like, hey man, like, you're an alcoholic, you do drugs and all that stuff, all you do is party, you have no respect for the game. So in the past, Daniel Cormier would always throw these personal insults, very personal insults, via Twitter or face-to-face in person to John Jones. And now Daniel Cormier's like, hey, UFC should do something about this. The UFC should look out for John Jones' health and well-being. And now there's speculation on what the UFC should do to John Jones. Now, I always said that at the very worst, will be John Jones losing his belt for a year, and then he's going to be an automatic number one contender. And then he'll either be an automatic number one contender, or he's going to face whoever is top ranked to go face the champion next, which would probably be Dominic Reyes. If things go how I expect it to be, John Jones would go lose his belt. It would then be an interim title fight that would involve Smith and Dominic Reyes. And I predict Dominic Reyes defeating Smith, which would then lead for a year later for John Jones to come back, and he's going to have the rubber match with Dominic Reyes. That's how I predict it. And to be honest with you, that's the very worst case scenario for John Jones as it pertains to his UFC career. Because John Jones, over the years, has gone through so many problems with his problem with alcoholism and negligence. There was a story of which he ran over a woman, and it was a hit and run because he ran over a woman and then ran off and has been arrested several times through being intoxication while driving. It's very, very muddy, the career and the life of John Jones, and I feel so much empathy with him, considering the fact that I have a lot of friends in my personal life who've gone through rehab and who has had messed up childhoods, who went towards alcohol and the party scene in order for them to be fulfilled in their life. So from my friends' perspectives, they and a little bit of me can understand where John Jones' life kind of is. It's this train wreck. It's a train wreck for a person who's got so much potential, but he's kind of it's so frustrating. It really is frustrating because John Jones, seriously, I always believe John Jones has all the potential to be like a Ronda Rousey or Conor McGregor levels, but he always keeps getting in trouble so often that it's hard to rely on him for being this great larger-than-life superstar, but his skills in the octagon is without a doubt one of the best ever. He's one of the best ever to step inside the octagon, and things aren't going well for him outside the octagon. So Daniel Cormier is saying that the UFC should do something about this, that UFC should be like, hey, John Jones, we are going to strip the belt away from you, and we are going to assist you. We're going to assist you in the rehab. But it turns out that the county of Albuquerque, New Mexico, they're the ones who are going to supervise and overlook John Jones. Now, the UFC has responded to this in the sense that there was a statement out there by a UFC representative, not Dana White, who says that we understand the problem with John Jones, and we are going through an investigation. So there's already these speculations that are going on Twitter already. There are some fighters throwing out ideas. Some fighters and some analysts and some fans of MMA are already saying John Jones should be fired. And I'm telling you right now, that is not going to happen. He is such a great fighter. Not only is he such a great fighter, he is such a moneymaker for the UFC. Without a doubt, he is one of the top fighters of the entire organization's history. Without a doubt. If John Jones is in a card, I can guarantee you that will sell pay-per-view money because he is that good. And so I don't see John Jones being fired. This will be another situation in that it's happened in the past where he does something wrong and he gets suspended and then he comes right back up. the truth is, if something does happen to him, even if he does go to jail time, I can see him come back because he holds that much clout. But yeah, say a worst case scenario, he just loses the belt and then he comes back, which would be very interesting. Considering that Anthony Rumble Johnson, he's saying that he wants, even though the guy is like over 300 pounds, he's saying he wants to compete in light heavyweights. We can go see Smith, Dominic Reyes, and Anthony Johnson, even maybe Daniel Cormier. Like now that John Jones might be gone from the light heavyweight division, we might see Cormier coming back. Now he says that he doesn't want to go back because the weight cut is really tough, but you don't know. With John Jones being gone, there is a whole lot there that can be filled by another fighter, even though he is a top star. So, coming back after the break, we will continue on for some more MMA news. This is a GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after the break.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts. Past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
And welcome back. So this is reporting in from BJPen.com that Alexander Volkanovski versus Max Holloway rematch is scratched from UFC 251. A planned rematch between UFC featherweight champion Alexander Volkanovski and Max Holloway has been scratched from UFC 251, another major blow to the card. The UFC planned on a double bill of title fights at UFC 251, which is still tentatively scheduled to take place on June 6 in Perth, Australia. Earlier this week, we found out that the co-main event between UFC Women's Flyweight Champion Valentina Shevchenko and Joanna Calderwood has been postponed, and now Volkanovski vs. Holloway has been scratched, as well as putting the entire event in jeopardy of not happening as planned. Speaking on ESPN, Volkanovski confirmed his title defense against Holloway is postponed until further notice due to coronavirus pandemic. He goes on to say, to be honest with you, nothing was signed, nothing was locked in, everything was pointing towards Perth, but we're still not sure whether it's going to go ahead or whether it's not, Volkanovski said. But I'm in a weird position where I'm being quarantined, not being able to train properly, not being able to get over to New Zealand. So are we still going to be doing that card? I just don't think that's a good idea for me. Especially coming off a broken hand, for me to try and overcome an injury and then go into a camp and not be fully prepared to camp, it's not a good idea. So I don't think the Perth card will go ahead. But if it does, I don't know the chances of me being in it. The UFC has already postponed events in London, Columbus, and Portland, and events originally scheduled for Brooklyn, Nebraska, Oklahoma City, and San Diego through April and May are in jeopardy as well. UFC President Dana White has been adamant the show will go on, but it will seem like the coronavirus outbreak is a fight the UFC can't win, and Volkanovski versus Holloway is the latest casualty of it. So let's talk about what Dana White said previously, just a week ago, where he's always adamant about this. It's true. Where he's like, hey, the UFC events will happen. He guaranteed us that after the Khabib versus Ferguson fight, every event from that was canceled previously will be pushed forward, and every event coming up after that event will be scheduled as planned. So obviously that's not really the case here, as multiple events from the UFC have been rescheduled, have been rescheduled and have been taken off. We got fights that were confirmed that these fights were definitely going to happen by Dana White. All of a sudden we're hearing reports, you know what, it's actually not going to happen, and the fighters themselves are then confirming that these events are not going to happen. So UFC 251, will it happen? Probably not then. It's very unlikely. Okay, so here's the thing. At this point, every sporting event should be postponed, because even in China, which is very strange, so even in China, even though that nation has been handling the coronavirus a lot more better than the States, it was supposed to restart its events as usual this month, but because of the COVID-19 issue getting even more bigger internationally, because of that issue, they had to cancel some events. For instance, the CBA, the Chinese Basketball Association, that sporting event or sporting organization was supposed to continue on sometime in the middle of this month. The Chinese Basketball Association, which is probably the second biggest basketball association in the world right now, was supposed to continue middle of April. And everything looked all fine. There was a lot of news reporting that, CBA will definitely happen again. All signs point this way. Things are gonna go right for the CBA. Now we're learning it went from things are going right to now, you know what? It's not gonna happen. It's gonna be suspended. It's gonna be postponed. We don't know when the CBA is gonna happen. The same thing happened for basketball and for the NBA here in the States. And also for March Madness. There was news that March Madness was going to be postponed till even April. But then a lot of these NCAA players are like, you know what? Never mind. I'm going to go straight to the NBA draft, which then led to March Madness being canceled because the college players recognize that there is no actual incentive for a player to go into March Madness if you are already a top ranked prospect. So there is no reasonable way for a top ranked prospect to compete or perform in the March Madness when they know that their draft stock could drop down if they themselves end up getting sick. It just looks bad to them. It looks bad to the teams. The NBA was planning to do a closed indoor event in an isolated location somewhere in Louisiana in order for their events to continue forward, which is very sketchy. I compare the NBA trying to do a closed-off tournament event in Louisiana to that of UFC trying to create an atmosphere for these fighters in a closed building that looks very cheap and ruckety, that doesn't make all that much sense in relation to all the other teams. Honestly, when you think the LA Lakers will get home court advantage playing in Louisiana all because their banner and logo is in the flooring? No, that doesn't really count. And the same thing applies for the UFC. UFC is supposed to be this larger-than-life event with the greatest MMA fighters in the world, and then you see Khabib Nurmagomedov fighting Tony Ferguson in this small, isolated film studio where everything is all awkward, production quality and presentation looks very cheap. No sporting organization can create their event and make it look good at this current point in time. And so now we know that UFC events are being canceled, and no matter how much Dana White wants to push forward that the media are wimps and that the media are creating all this all this fake news and stuff, the fighters themselves are confirming what the media has been saying. The media has been saying these events can definitely be canceled, and then Dana White insults the media, which then leads to the fighters saying, no, I can safely tell you right now, these events will be canceled. These events will be canceled. It's very infuriating when stuff like this does happen. That we're getting different reports from different people that we should trust. We should trust everything Dana White is saying, but we should also trust what the fighters are saying also, since they're the ones who are actually fighting. We're getting mixed news from both parties, and one party will insult the media if you believe them, and then the fighters are then contradicting the news. It's very difficult. But another fighter who also is canceling as a result of the coronavirus pandemic is Derek Lewis. This is coming in from MMAmania.com. Despite the crippling coronavirus pandemic, which led to international lockdowns and the closure of non-essential businesses, a handful of statewide mixed martial arts events and fighters are still hoping to see action later this month. Derek Lewis isn't one of them. Probably because the Black Beast is living off his mattress fortune and can stand to miss a payday or two. Or maybe the heavyweight power puncher just wants to keep his family safe by staying at home and not putting himself at risk. He goes on to say, "I want to get through this safely," Lewis told MMA Junkie. I can't be selfish and stuff like that and go out there and myself sick and all my family and bring back whatever I got and give it to my kids and stuff like that and my loved ones. So I've got to be not selfish enough and just the way how he words is very awkwardly, sorry, and just waits and see what the president has to say about everything, and just look up to the leaders and just see what they have to say. Derek Lewis, 35, was fortunate to have competed right before the coronavirus craze took hold, to which he competed at UFC 247 this past February. So he fought his one fight of the year, which makes him not all that financially unstable for the year of 2020. So Derek Lewis, if you don't want to compete because of a sickness, personally for me, I don't want to go out there. Like, I play a lot of basketball, and also my friends do boxing in the side. They do amateur boxing. They themselves don't want to train or to perform any sports tasks. Or my friend's boxing gym is closed because he just doesn't want to risk the idea of like people coming in, they get sick, and then they go home, and then they get their family sick. My parents are in their mid to late 60s, so trust me, I don't want them to get sick. And for Derek Lewis, I understand him if he says, you know what, I don't want to go out there and do something that might result in me getting sick, to which my loved ones, even if there's a 4% chance of somebody passing away as a result of the coronavirus, there's still that chance. And considering the fact that people who are older in the spectrum are more likely to get sick, or the fact that a kid's immune system is being attacked already at a young age by something that people are not prepped up for already, that's very understandable as to why you are like scared of this really being bad for your health and bad for your family. I understand Derek Lewis' position, and I respect him for it. After the short break, we will discuss more MMA events coming up right here, the GSMC MMA podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
So we've been discussing fighters canceling their fights. We've been discussing about UFC events not taking place, and another fight that could not be happening will be Henry Cejudo versus Jose Aldo. Now, it's not confirmed yet that this fight from UFC 250 will be canceled, but Henry Cejudo calls out Dominic Cruz to serve as a backup in case Jose Aldo can't make UFC 250. This is coming in from MMAJunkie.com, to which, with UFC 249 seemingly in jeopardy, Henry Cejudo has decided to take precautionary measures regarding his next fight as well. UFC bantamweight champion Cejudo, who is 9-2 in the UFC, 15-2 overall in MMA, is scheduled to take on Jose Aldo in the UFC 250 headliner on May 9 in Sao Paulo, but with the travel bans implemented globally due to the coronavirus outbreak, Cejudo suggested that the event might be moved to the US, and Aldo might not be able to leave Brazil, which is very understandable. But you got Khabib Nurmagomedov, who can't even leave Russia. So Henry Cejudo decided to take matters into his own hands by ensuring a backup opponent is available for his first title defense, calling out former UFC bantamweight champion Dominic Cruz. So it is coming in from his Twitter. Since UFC 249 is in jeopardy because we can't get Khabib out of Russia, so just in case we can't get Jose Baldo into America soil, make sure to bring your untailored tuxedo that you wear every Saturday along with your balls, because you're on deck, sweetheart, at Dominic Cruz. So Henry Cejudo posted a picture of Dominic Cruz in this very weird image where he's wearing this like ugly looking white bluish hat from like the 1800s with this ugly red collar shirt. It looks pretty terrible, to be honest with you. So Dominic Cruz hasn't competed since losing his title to Cody Garbrandt in December of 2016. And has been sidelined due to a myriad of injuries. He has briefly linked to a fight with Corey Sandhagen for the UFC San Diego card on May 16, but the fight never materialized. So I respect Henry Cejudo for saying, hey, I understand what the problems are. I understand and recognize that UFC events are not happening as they are planned. Fights are being mixed up. We got fights being canceled. We got events being canceled. So I'm going to call out somebody who lives in the States and who's a big name. Dominic Cruz is a big name, one of the best ever. I'm going to call him out, and hopefully we can go get a fight going. So I respect Henry Cejudo for that aspect. Now, I don't respect the fact that like he's disregarding a fighter, Jose Aldo, one of the best ever, to not to not fight against him. So I find that very confusing, really. So Henry Cejudo, he's supposed to be training against Jose Aldo, but now he's like, hey, I want to fight Dominic Cruz, because Dominic Cruz and Jose Aldo fight very, very differently. The way that they switch stances and the way how they go and box and fight each other in the technical aspect are very, very different. And so Henry Cejudo is like, he's pretty much saying, you know what? I'm kind of giving up on the idea of me fighting you, Aldo. I'm now going towards this guy, so I'm going to train a little bit to prep myself up to go fight Dominic Cruz. Now, Dominic Cruz hasn't fought in 4 years, and I don't expect him to fight against Henry Cejudo. Yes, Dominic Cruz fighting against Henry Cejudo can possibly happen. It can definitely happen, considering the circumstances of what's going on right now in the UFC, and the fact that the bantamweight division is kind of in limbo at this point, also along with the flyweight division. Considering that they are in limbo and the circumstances that are happening right now in the States, I could see Dominic Cruz, despite not fighting for the past 4 years, can bypass his way and getting a title fight. Now, whether or not that is right for Dominic Cruz, I don't think so. The guy has gone through so many injuries, and at this point, I think he's kind of comfortable playing the role as a commentator. He's a very smart person, very intelligent, very eloquent person who understands and analyzes the fight game in a very high level. So I think he's self-aware of himself to recognize that, you know what, I don't have what it takes anymore, that I'm not going to let my personal pride take over me. I understand physically that I am not prepped up to go and compete in the MMA level. I think I'm good enough to go and do some sparring matches and I'm pretty sure he can go to the gym and he can whoop up anyone's butt in an immediate fight. I can easily see that. But I believe that he believes that he is not at that level anymore. So I don't expect Dominic Cruz to come out of retirement to go fight against Henry Cejudo. Even if it is a title fight, I don't expect that to happen. So while Dominic Cruz might serve as the replacement fighter for Jose Aldo, we might see another replacement fighter coming up at UFC 249. As reported by MMAmania.com, Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje is in the works for UFC 249, with Khabib Nurmagomedov quarantined in Russia. Reigning lightweight champion Khabib Nurmagomedov is currently stuck in his native Dagestan because Russia has locked down international travel in response to the coronavirus pandemic that everyone but UFC is attempting to control. As a result, the Eagle may not be able to fight Tony Ferguson in the UFC 249 main event on April 18, which is why UFC has now asked lightweight contender Justin Gaethje to replace Nurmagomedov, presumably for the interim strap. That's according to ESPN reporter Ariel Helwani. UFC is aware of the Nurmagomedov status and have now begun looking at alternate plans for the April 18 main event and card, which they are still determined to put on, Helwani wrote on Twitter. As a result, Tony Ferguson, per sources, has been offered a fight against top contender Justin Gaethje. However, that fight has not been agreed upon nor finalized. UFC 249 still does not have a confirmed location. The promotion has been scrambling to stage live events in the wake of the coronavirus pandemic. 3 fight cards were already postponed in March, and now April appears to be in jeopardy. As well as though UFC President Dana White may be the last one to figure that out. Stay tuned. So, UFC 249, we talk about this every single week. Will it happen? Will it not happen? Well, I still remember those events being canceled. I still remember Dana White saying, no matter what, the UFC Fight Night London card is 100% gonna happen. That card will, without a doubt, happen. And so there was speculation that we would have Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington. This fight that logically should not be happening at all. It's gonna be like Tyron Woodley versus Colby Covington in this very big fight that's gonna happen in just 5 days from this point on. It was so bizarre. It's 5 days before UFC Fight Night London was gonna happen. Dana White was still like, this card will happen. Don't even think about it. The media's wrong. This fight card that has 13 canceled fights coming up in 5 days. That event will still happen no matter what. They were even willing to go and find fighters who were not even employed by the UFC to compete in that card. So I'm not surprised to recognize or to see this, that Dana White, I don't think UFC 249 is going to be canceled. We've been speculating on this event being canceled what I'm going to say is that UFC 249, the event will not be canceled, but fights will be canceled. So the fights that are happening within the card of UFC 249 will be canceled. That's why you got reported rumors of Rosenstrike versus Francis Ngannou, which was said was going to happen at UFC 249. And now we have Ngannou saying, hey, I don't know if this fight is even going to happen. Rosenstrike says, you know what, I'm not sure if this fight is going to happen. We talked about it. We would like to fight at UFC 249. Dana White says that it would be a great idea. It'd be great. He wants to build the most this is Dana White's words. He says he wants to build the most baddest card possible ever for UFC 249. Now that's just him playing the role as a promoter, hyping up a card that's that hopefully does well, because it's got some really good fights to be honest with you. Rose Namajunas versus Jessica Andrade. That fight is going to be absolutely awesome. I predict that fight will be fight of the night. If that's a big if. That's if that fight isn't canceled, because we got fighters like Derek Lewis in there canceling. We got fighters like Alexander Volkanovski canceling. We got Henry Cejudo, who's already thinking about other fighters other than Jose Aldo, because he doesn't know if Jose Aldo can even mix the events. We got Tony Ferguson, pretty fine moving on with a different fighter, because even he recognizes, hey, I understand the situation's happening right now. I need to fight somebody. I need to feed my family. So Justin Gaethje, you're up next. I'm going to fight you no matter what at some point in the future. So Justin Gaethje might be the opponent for Tony Ferguson coming up at UFC 249. Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov surely is a cursed fight. It is, I think, the fourth or fifth time. I think it's either the fourth or fifth time this fight has been canceled due to some unforeseen circumstances. And at this point, I don't think it's going to happen. I really don't. So UFC 249, that event will still move forward. It's still going to happen. But the fights that you expect from that event, I don't think so. This is the GSMC MMA podcast, coming back right after the break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
You have to a little bit respect Dana White's tenacity to always keep the show going forward. Even though events are being canceled, fights are being canceled, that's not stopping Dana White from pushing forward and continuing on with the plans going forward. And so this leads to MMAJunkie.com with Bob Arum slamming Dana White over UFC 249 plans. He says he's somebody with a flawed intelligence. Veteran boxing promoter Bob Arum has taken aim at Dana White over the UFC president's dogged determination to go ahead with UFC 249. While most of the sporting world has gone into temporary shutdown during COVID-19 pandemic, White has remained steadfast in his commitment to keep the UFC April 18 pay-per-view event alive. That approach has led to criticism from some quarters, with 88-year-old Arum telling CBS Sports' State of Combat podcast that White should be ashamed of himself for continuing to push for the show. What's going on in this country and the world with this virus? The last thing we need is for an event to take place with no spectators just to get the event to take place, he said. But the truth is, Dana White is somebody with a flawed intelligence. While White is persisting with his plans to keep UFC 249 going, Hall of Fame boxing promoter Arum has completely shut down his events and says he won't make any firm plans for his next slate of shows until he knows what's happening with the ongoing coronavirus situation. People ask me what plans I'm making for these fights, when we'll get it all clear, because I don't know when the all clear is going to be, and I have no idea whether it'll be 2 months, 3 months, or even the rest of the year. I'm not making any plans right now, he said. When this thing looks like it's clearing up, we will start making plans. It remains unclear what form UFC 249 will take, with no news confirmed or either the fight card or the location of the event. As things stand, it seems unlikely the planned UFC lightweight title fight between Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson will be the headline card for UFC 249. So at this point, we've got a host of fighters who are throwing out their names, and at this point, it is very unsure, at least to the fight fans and to the media, on what is real and what isn't real, because a lot of these fighters have the tendency to like throw a lot of jabs and kind of play a character on their social media. So at this point, we've got fighters like Tyron Woodley, Kamaru Usman, and Jorge Masvidal all throwing their hats to possibly fighting at UFC 249 in just 2 weeks' time. They're going to prep up these top fighters, these champions, who are prepping themselves up for a major fight coming up in 2 weeks. It's not all that smart. It really isn't. I find it very strange that a lot of these fighters are like, hey man, the UFC is a business, it's a fight game, you gotta be smart with your decision making, so you can go and fight for the title, or, like, it's very, very strange how a lot of these fighters have this perspective of themselves, that they're smart fighters, they're smart, business savvy, like, they're always planning for the future, they're looking for the best options available, and then there's an option for you to fight at a major event in an isolated room. There's a chance that this fight could happen in a film studio, and you got to prep up for this fight in the next 2 weeks, where you're not going to get guaranteed money because it's a random fight that you're not expecting. You got to prep up against a top tier contender, a top fighter, a champion, or a person who's up there in the rankings. All of a sudden, within the span of just 2 weeks, you got to be prepped up for that. You got weight cutting to deal with. Tyron Woodley has a history of having problems with weight cutting. You got fighters like Dustin Poirier even struggling with weight cutting. So, what's going to happen with UFC 249? Are these fighters really full of it though, or are they really passionate and they really want to go fight at UFC 249? I'm really unsure about that, because it is reported by also MMA Junkie that Kamaru Usman willing to risk it all with UFC 249 title defense against Jorge Masvidal, and he calls Jorge Masvidal's manager foul. Kamaru Usman claims he's offered to defend his welterweight title in the main event of UFC 249 next month. Jorge Masvidal's manager, however, insists the champion is lying, with all signs pointing to Khabib Nurmagomedov versus Tony Ferguson falling apart for a 5th time. At the UFC, in need of a new headliner for its increasingly makeshift April 18 card, we now know that Tony Ferguson has been offered a fight against Justin Gaethje, and it's not been confirmed that we are going to see a Justin Gaethje fight. But it is said that Usman is stepping up in place for UFC President Dana White directly against Jorge Masvidal. Usman detailed the situation on Monday on social media and said he first pitched the idea to White on March 24, so exactly 1 week ago. He goes on to say, "Last Tuesday, I knew that Khabib was out of the country," Usman said on his Instagram Live. "I texted Dana White directly. I said, Dana, I understand situations are going on, but guess what? I haven't really been training like that. But I'm willing to come in, and I'm willing to save that event. I'm willing to save it because at home, people don't have anything to watch. They need some entertainment. Some people want to see this fight. People want to see me and fake journeyman Jorge Masvidal. People want to see the fight. Let's do it." Despite his lack of training camp, Usman said he was prepared to compete so long as the UFC put proper precautions in place to keep him safe amid the ongoing coronavirus pandemic. However, despite a Twitter post to the contrary, he's adamant that Jorge Masvidal's side didn't want to comply. According to Usman, the UFC and Masvidal's management has struggled to pin Masvidal down for an immediate answer. Finally, game bread was reached, and according to Usman, the answer he got back was that the fight was declined. It's not going to happen, to be honest, Usman said. He has turned down the fight. He has turned it down. He said, "No, I'm not ready to fight. I'm smoking, drinking, and I'm fat. I'm not ready to take the fight." That's what he said. He's been drinking that liquor that no one can pronounce the name of. Masvidal's manager, Abraham Kawa of First Round Management, didn't take Usman's assertions lightly. He admitted to the UFC making contact about potentially making a fight prior to Monday's news about Nurmagomedov vs. Ferguson was likely off. But he said Masvidal agreed, which is where his account conflicts with Usman. I just want everybody to understand one thing. If there's one thing you know about Jorge, he doesn't have to lie. Kawas said on Instagram Live, he has no reason for him to lie. He's got no issues. We have accepted the Usman fight twice now. 2 times. Once for New York City at UFC 244, and we all know how that ended up. Usman said no. He didn't want to make that fight happen. He wanted, I don't know what. He had some injury or no injury. I don't know, man. It's weird with him and his stuff. Now, we accept it again, and he's saying we turned it down. That's a damn lie. We got the phone call. We were asked. We knew this was coming. We said, absolutely, let's go. We knew how this was going. Do you know how this is going to go? Did we think Usman would take the fight? Well, let's see. He didn't take it on 7 weeks notice last time. He didn't take it on 7 weeks notice last time. What makes any of you think he's going to take it in 2 weeks notice this time? It wasn't going to happen. You guys can say what you want. I know on our end we accepted. Whatever happened after that, I can tell you, man. I just know this is 2 times we've said yes to Usman, and 2 times we don't have an answer. And this is where I begin to think it's a total work, because afterwards, Usman proceeds to cut a WWE-style pro wrestling promo, with him saying, I'm the real African gangsta. A fight is a fight. My fight IQ is better than all these guys. When it comes down to bringing that dog out and really go out there and get to the fight, no one is touching me, I said. I'm going to do this. Take care of me. I'm going to do it. I'll put my title on the line. Take care of me. I have never been that company man. I've never been the one to be a company man. Oh, I'm going to do what the company needs. But the higher I got in the sport, and now that I'm the top, and seeing how these events went down, how these things are getting done with Sean Shelby and Dana and Mick Maynard and Hunter Campbell, I see how hard these guys worked to put these things together. And if an event falls out, it's not just the main event that falls out. Everyone on the card can't eat. Everybody, they're screwed. So Usman at this point now is pretty much cutting a promo style kind of thing. So are we going to expect Jorge Masvidal versus Kamaru Usman, who really declined the fight? Was there even a call in the first place? Could this all be made up so they can promote the fight? At this point, I really don't know. And I don't think it is a logically smart idea for Kamaru Usman or Jorge Masvidal to drop their stock to possibly lose against a very dangerous opponent in just 2 weeks' notice. I just don't see that being a logically smart move from their sides. I don't see why Jorge Masvidal should say yes, and there's no reason why Kamaru Usman should say yes. I speculate that they are just beefing for the sake of beefing at this point. So, coming up right after the break, we will discuss more MMA news right here at the GSMC MMA Podcast.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
So we know Henry Cejudo wants to challenge Dominic Cruz if Jose Aldo can't make the fight at UFC 250. And Dominic Cruz, in an interview by MMAfighting.com, Dominic Cruz clears the air about rumored fight with Corey Sandhagen, agreeing to face Peter Yan first. So Dominic Cruz was supposed to fight against Corey Sandhagen initially, coming up after a 4-year layoff, but instead that fight has been dropped, and we are now going to learn why. Dominic Cruz seems to be getting closer to an octagon return. In the meantime, he wants to clear up a few things. The former UFC bantamweight champion hasn't competed since December 2016 when he lost the title to Cody Garbrandt at UFC 207. After a 3+ year road of injuries and recoveries, Cruz is feeling stronger and healthier for each day that passes. Earlier this month, surging bantamweight contender Corey Sandhagen took to Instagram revealing he agreed to fight against the Dominator for the UFC scheduled return to San Diego May 16. That event has been cancelled so far. In a recent interview with MMA Fighting, Sandhagen said he thinks Cruz told the UFC he wasn't going to be ready by then, before agreeing to fight. Cruz sees the situation from a much different perspective. That's what I want to clear up, because I keep getting people ask me about Corey Sandhagen, and that he took the fight, and then he asked me or something. Cruz told MMA Fighting. I'm like, well, is that a fact or is that experience? Because I didn't talk to Corey Sandhagen. Who said that I took it? What I've heard is that he's saying that he took the fight and I didn't. By the way, in this entire interview, Dominic Cruz, he's pretty much avoiding answers, questions for the most part. And he's like replying questions with other questions in very vague sort of like, have you guys ever heard like how Kyrie Irving, when he talked to Stephen A. Smith, like Stephen A. Smith talked to Kyrie Irving and he says, hey Kyrie, were you beefing with LeBron? And then Kyrie was like, was I really? And like he didn't give a real answer to that. He just avoided it with like skepticism. And that's what I'm kind of getting here from Dominic Cruz when I read this transcript here from his interview. Who said I took it? What I've heard is that he's saying that he took the fight and I didn't. My question is, who did he talk to and said that I got offered the fight and I said no? Question mark. What I know is there's only one common denominator between myself and any of the other fighters that might get matched up with Sean Shelby. That might get matched up is Sean Shelby. He's the matchmaker. Don't we all know that in the whole world? So Sean Shelby is the matchmaker. Me and Corey Sandhagen don't talk. Who is Corey Sandhagen getting his information from? He's getting it from the matchmaker. Where else would he get it? He's the only guy talking to both of us, isn't he? What Shelby does is he creates fights between fighters before the fight happens so that he can get himself out of the way. That's my experience. It's not a fact, and what I am getting from this is Shelby's telling Sandhagen about me, then Corey Sandhagen puts it out there and then expects me to bite. According to Cruz, the conversation in regards to his return to the octagon began with a question on what would be... Alright, so let's just talk about Corey Sandhagen first. Alright, so from what I'm getting from Dominic Cruz was that Corey Sandhagen was told by Sean Shelby to go and challenge Dominic Cruz in order to create some momentum for a fight that the two of them could potentially fight on, and Dominic Cruz just didn't get the notice. What I think actually happened, Sean Shelby probably told Sandhagen that, hey, we're thinking about you fighting against Dominic Cruz, and it's not confirmed. Shelby's saying, hey, you could go fight Cruz. Corey is like, you know what? Fine, I'm up for it. I can definitely fight Dominic Cruz. But Dominic Cruz hasn't agreed to that yet. It's just a big misunderstanding, really. That's how I see it. I think it's a complete big misunderstanding. Nothing really was written on paper for it. And so Dominic Cruz, instead of being like, oh, it's just a misunderstanding, is like, hey, where do you get this information from? It's all a conspiracy. Because Dominic Cruz, he's a very smart guy. If you hear how he talks, he kind of talks to himself. He kind of talks to himself sometimes like in the third person and like starts rambling a lot. I still remember the post press conference where he was talking about his fight against Cody Garbrandt. The dude got knocked out. And he then goes on in this like weird inspirational kind of speech where he talks about like life and himself, and it's just very off the wall for the most part. And that's why I'm getting it from here more than anything else. Like I feel like he talks himself into being in situations where he has to talk like, where he has to like try to reach out for some information. I don't know. He's a very skeptical person. So he goes on to say, Sean Shelby told me, in all reality, I said, how do I come back and get a title shot the fastest? Cruz explained, he said, you can get a title shot if you fight Petr Yan. I said, I want that fight. He said, well, technically, that's a harder fight, so you'll get a title shot right after it, but we don't want to give you a title shot right after, so we would give you Sandhagen before you get Yan. I was thinking, I want a title shot. I don't want to just fight anybody. I want to fight towards the title. So I would fight anybody. Let me get the title shot after the fight. Sean Shelby said, Petr Yan is the guy. I'll fight Petr Yan. He said that I can't fight. He said I can't fight Petr Yan because he's fighting Marlon Moraes. Well then, I'll fight Moraes or Petr Yan because those are direct fights straight to the title. After I beat either of those guys, I get a title shot. That's what I'm in this for, not to fight 13 times beforehand. Sean Shelby saying all this stuff to different fighters and not telling me about it. You offered me Petr Yan to get to the fight, and then you switch it up. That's the truth. I never said no to Sandhagen. I don't say no to fights. But he does say no to fights if they don't lead to title fights. Strange. What I said no was not fighting Peter Yan. I want to fight Peter Yan. I want to fight Marlon Moraes. I want to fight for the title after I get one of those guys. If you need me to get one fight back before I fight for the title, give me the guy you need me to fight before to get to that title. Cruz has been through a long layoff after 6-7 times. Then the article goes on about his career and then everything he's done for the division. And then he goes on to say how like he's going through like miscommunication issues right now with the UFC, Dana White, and Sean Shelby. But from what I can get from this interview is that Dominic Cruz, he wants to fight. He says he's perfectly fine and he's willing to go and fight. Then again, these are MMA fighters. They have a tendency of like being a character on camera or on social media and trying to like hype themselves up when they really shouldn't be. So, considering that even though Dominic Cruz is a really smart person and he's self-aware enough of himself to know what his strengths and weaknesses are, I don't think he's self-reflective enough to recognize when he's playing a character. And so Dominic Cruz is like, hey, I can go fight anybody as long as it leads me to a title fight. And now we're getting reports that Henry Cejudo is saying, hey, I'm fine if Dominic Cruz gets a straight title shot against me. And so far from this transcript, I don't think Dominic Cruz is aiming for an immediate title fight. I really don't. Dominic Cruz definitely needs a tune-up fight. He definitely needs a tune-up fight before he fights against somebody the caliber of Henry Cejudo. He needs someone to fight with that can get him to be prepped up because he hasn't fought in 4 years. You know, Dominic Cruz is one of the best ever, one of the best dynamic technical strikers I've ever seen ever in all of not just mixed martial arts, but in boxing also. Even though he's that good, the fact that he's been laid off for such a long period of time means that he's rusty, and he needs to fight somebody of the level of a Peter Yan or a Sanagan in order for him to be prepared and be ready to take on a Henry Cejudo or a Jose Aldo. So do I think Dominic Cruz is going to fight Henry Cejudo? I don't believe so. The reason I don't believe so because Dominic Cruz needs a tune-up match in order to get ready. And a fighter like Henry Cejudo, even though Cruz has all the abilities, he has all the skills from like 5 years ago to be the best fighter in the entire division. As of right now in 2020, considering the issues that are going on with the coronavirus and COVID-19, I don't think he's in a position right now where he should go get a title fight. I really don't think so. He goes on to say, he ends the interview by saying, why are we talking about my future when realistically we need to come together to figure out how we keep the sport going? Not when Dominic Cruz is fighting. How do we keep MMA moving is the question for me. That's what matters to me. I'm a part of the MMA and I can't fight. Nobody in the UFC can fight until we beat virus situation. It's shut down. We have one fight coming up, and one of the half of the main events is already out. That fight was going to be the biggest fight ever, in my opinion. I was looking forward to it, and now we know that he might end up fighting in UFC 250. Will he say yes to it? I don't really think so. Would it be interesting if we do see Henry Cejudo versus Dominic Cruz? Who will win that fight? If this was a couple years ago, I would say Dominic Cruz, but as of right now, considering the rust aspect of the fight game, I would go towards Cejudo. So you listen to the GSMC MMA podcast, and we will be back right after the break with something a little bit more positive.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
And welcome back. So, once again, COVID-19 is a huge issue right now currently in the world, but let's have some wee bit of fun here. So, if you are an MMA and or UFC fan, I found a quiz here that's labeled, only a true UFC fan will get 100% on this quiz. I consider myself a general MMA fan. Even though we're focusing on UFC, I love everything that is related to mixed martial arts. So, the Ultimate Fighting Championship, also known as the UFC, is an American favorite. Some name the UFC to be modern-day gladiators, except there's no weapons, just two bodies battling against each other for a title. The organization is based out of Las Vegas, Nevada, and owned by Endeavor. The president of UFC is Dana White. He's been president of UFC, blah, blah, Ultimate Fighter Show. In August of 2011, the Ultimate Fighting Championship announced that there has been a 7-year partnership with the widely known Fox Sports. And now, let's get towards the quiz. It's all background fodder. So, the quiz. If you are an MMA fan or a UFC fan, you will be able to pass this. Question 1. Who was the first female UFC fighter signed? Is it Holly Holm? Is it Nina Ansaroff? Is it Angela Hill? Or is it Ronda Rousey? So, the answer is Ronda Rousey here. I got it. Born in Riverside, California, this young woman started her MMA career at the age of 22. She made her MMA debut in August of 2010, fighting against Hayden Munoz. The fighter defeated Munoz by submission due to an armbar in just 23 seconds. Dana White, the president of the UFC, stated in an interview that in the next 10 years, there's going to be a female fighter in the UFC, and it'll be this fighter. Who was the first female UFC fighter? It was Ronda Rousey. Where was the first UFC held out of the United States? Is it A, Japan, B, China, C, Russia, or D, Puerto Rico? Up until the Ultimate Fighting Championship, 8 held February 16, 1996. These fighting events were primarily held in the United States. UFC 8 consisted of the 8-man tournament fights and the UFC Super Fight Championship between UFC champion Ken Shamrock and Kimo Leopoldo. Oh my gosh. This particular UFC event featured larger fighters against smaller fighters. That is where the name David vs. Goliath came in. I think that's when we're like Dan Severn German suplex person. Days before the event, the government made a ruling banning the event from happening. This ruling caused massive protesting. This MMA event is known as the first fight to cause controversy. Where was the first UFC held out of the United States? Japan, China, Russia, or Puerto Rico? Definitely, it took a while for there were UFC fighters that went over to Japan. I know that for sure. It took a while for the UFC to try to. Did they ever to ever like get fighters from the East European area? So not Russia. China, only recently they're trying to gauge towards the Chinese market. So it has to be Puerto Rico, because Puerto Rico has a history of like of a lot of shooting that's happening here. Where is the UFC headquarters located as of 2014? Is it New Orleans, Louisiana, Los Angeles, California, Las Vegas, Nevada, or Long Island, New York? As of 2014, the fact that it took a long time for the UFC to have an event happening in New York says it's not going to be New York. Los Angeles, California. Dana White has said that he currently resides in the Nevada area. And also, usually if an event does happen in the California area, it happens a lot in the Honda Center, which is in Anaheim, outside of LA. New Orleans, Louisiana. I don't think that's an odd one out for me. Last one, Las Vegas, Nevada. It has to be Las Vegas, Nevada. And it's correct. If you chose Las Vegas, Nevada to be in the location for UFC headquarters since 2014, you are correct. Which fighter is being described? One of the most hated due to his demeanor when it comes to a fight after becoming a member of the UFC, is immediately gained a huge fan base, also a ton of people who were not fans. His ability in the cage is extremely impressive and unique. He is an Irish professional fighter who began his MMA career in 2008, debuted in 2013. Okay then, which of these 4 fighters is Irish? Is it Nate Diaz, Floyd Mayweather, Daniel Cormier, or Conor McGregor? It's obviously Conor McGregor for that one. That was an easy one. Next one, what is the shape of the cage in the UFC? It's an obvious. So, the UFC cage, is it a circle? Is it a star? Is it a triangle? Or is it an octagon? Answer is octagon. Oh wow, who says... Honestly, I would like it if there's a star-shaped like ring. That'd be very unique and different. What beer company started to sponsor the UFC in 2018? The Ultimate Fighting Championship is well known for its sponsorship logos plastered all over the octagon and multiple commercials throughout the event promoting their sponsorships. When the UFC announced the ending of its 9-year sponsorship with Anheuser-Busch, Bud Light being known as the beer of the UFC, fans were completely shocked, not knowing where their focus would be turned to. When Bud signed the promotional contract, it initially sent out the message that this was a real player in the world of sports. In 2018, the UFC signed a multi-year sponsorship deal with a Mexican import brand, What beer company began sponsoring the UFC in 2018? Was it Corona, Miller, Heineken, or Modelo? If you guys have heard Bruce Buffer talk in before every fight, sponsored by Modelo. The answer is Modelo. That's an easy one there. Question 7. What year was the UFC founded? You guys should all know this. Alright. The Ultimate Fighting Championship franchise, well known as the home in bars across the globe, the thrill of watching it, blah, blah, blah. So when was the UFC founded? The UFC was founded in 1993. Yeah. The other options were 1990, too early, 2003, too late, 1989, a wee bit way too early. 1993 was the best one, because at that point, that's when the Ultimate Fighting craze really began to bleed in towards pop culture and media. I remember that. I ain't that old. What year was Ronda Rousey signed to the UFC? Was it? Oh, they'll say same month. So, this is from a previous question here. She debuted in 2013. Now, did she debut in November 2013 or August 2013? Ronda Rousey debuted in November 2013. What? Oh, I'm actually wrong with that one. So she debuted in 2012. Oh wow, that was a huge L for me. So that's the first wrong for me then. So now I know Ronda Rousey, she signed to the UFC in November of 2012. Yeah, all right. I thought she fought in 2013, but signed in 2012. I got a proof check on that. Who won the first series of The Ultimate Fighter at light heavyweights? Was it? Alright guys, so who was the first Ultimate Fighter in the light heavyweight division? Was it Tito Ortiz? No. Nate Diaz? No. Conor McGregor? No. Forrest Griffin? Technically Stephen Bonner, if you put a weird asterisk to that. Who is the youngest champion in UFC history? Youngest champion ever. Oh, that's easy. John Jones. Alright, coming up. Oh, this is an interesting one. Alright, this is gonna be the last one, and it's a very unique one. What UFC referee is being described? The referee is best known for officiating numerous Ultimate Fighting Championship fights. In 2006, this referee opened his own MMA gym in LA, California. He's also a former police officer for the LAPD. His nickname came from his large size and stature, standing at 6'3" and weighing 260 pounds. On the UFC, he was a senior referee and was most well known for his catchphrase, "Let's get it on!" He has served as one of the head referees for nearly every Ultimate Fighting Championship from UFC 2 to UFC 7. What UFC referee is being described here? What is a big 6'3" LAPD deep voice referee in the UFC? Is it Conor McGregor? Yes. If you chose Conor McGregor, you are definitely wrong there. Is it Bruce Buffer? I did not know Bruce Buffer was a referee, nor was he 6'3". Is it Herb Dean? No, Herb Dean, I don't think has a background as an LAPD officer. Or is it Big John McCarthy? The answer is Big John McCarthy. If you chose Conor McGregor, then you are definitely not from this world, nor do you watch MMA. Okay, that was a kind of a fun one there. Thank you for playing along with me if you're at home, and thank you for listening to the GSMC MMA podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps up. Also, if you can please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and on Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts MMA Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.